Lovely. I want to tell you something really special. India and Tibet have shared wonderful relations. His Holiness the Dalai Lama has, since the time he's come to India, Tibet has been, and Tibetan people have been like a family. Well, we as Indians wholeheartedly on this Independence Day welcome you, Dr. Sangay, to give your opening keynote address. Dr. Sangay, over to you.
So thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a great honor to be, the chief guest for the day. And today is 74th anniversary of India's Independence Day, and we wish India greatness. And listening to Prime Minister Modi ji's speech this morning to support self-reliance and to support Make in India, and to make India #1 in the world. And I want to touch on these three issues. And let's today we are having this event virtually, primarily because of coronavirus. And we all should know that coronavirus originated in China, and because of which it has created pandemic, and it has created so much pain. Economic pain, social pain, and geopolitically as well. So, and then the younger generation who are watching today, they will pay a huge price, because now the whole world will change, and the economic downturn, it has taken place globally, and even in India, the unemployment rate is up, and for few years to come, I think it will be a big challenge. So I think Prime Minister Modi ji to support Make in India, to make India great, and to make India #1 is laudable. Having said that, the discourse in India has always been India since independence. When you say 74 years old India, it sounds like India is a very new minor, marginal kind of country, which is only 74 years old, which is not true. Or sometimes the discourse goes back to 700 years of occupation, 500 years so under Mughals, and then 200 years. So now, let me touch on, the 74 years since independence, makes it sound India as a new country, India is not a new country and is not 74 years young. It's an ancient, old country. And sometimes the discourse takes place about 700 years of occupation, 500 years also under Mughals, and then 200 also under British rule. And then that, takes us into a mindset of being a victim. Rather, the discourse should be from, almost 2nd century to 12th century. For almost 1,000 years, India was #1 in the world. And at that time, the Nalanda University, the Takshashila were there, and India was the land of wisdom. Nowadays, we try to seek technology from Japan and Korea, also from China. But rather, during those days, the Chinese came to India to learn, and Japanese came, the Koreans came, and people from all over the world came to India to learn things, right? So India was #1 then. So the discourse should take place of those period when India was #1. Now the issue before us is, how can we revive that era, that ethos, that values, that wisdom to make India #1. So with that, let me, touch on the title, India and Tibet, Two Countries, One Ideology. India and Tibet are in some sense inseparable. More than 100 million years ago, India as a territory was attached to Africa, especially Madagascar, and it left Madagascar and came towards north, and then it hit the Himalayas, and then it pushed the Tibetan plateau or the Himalayas up and up, and the so India came from Africa and attached itself to the Himalayas and attached itself to Tibet, and it pushed upward. So Tibet at that time could have been a very fertile, lowland. Now Tibet is mountainous region with 4,000 meters high on average. So the Tibet and India story originated 100 million years ago, especially 50 million years ago. We were attached together. So geographically, we are attached. And India came to Tibet. And then as far as Tibetan Buddhism is concerned, also it came from India. During 7th century, King Songtsen Gampo sent a very learned scholar to India along with 16 students to learn Sanskrit. So our Tibetan script is from the Gupta period, the Sanskrit version, and also our grammar is very much based on Sanskrit. So we took that, and along with it we also took the Buddhist knowledge. Now if you go to any Buddhist country in the world, there are 14 Buddhist countries or 54 or so where a major portion of the population are Buddhist. And but in any of this country, you will not find more than 24 volumes of what Buddha said. But only in Tibetan, you will find 300 volumes of what Buddha said. So even in India, you don't have all those wisdom the Buddha shared, 2000 plus years ago, only in Tibetan language we have shared. So we have preserved that. So that way, again, we are attached. Now, in 9th century, Buddhism was challenged, and many of the Buddhist monasteries were destroyed in Tibet as well. And after that period, another great Indian scholar called Atisha was invited to Tibet, and he helped revive Buddhism again. So then we move forward. From 7th, 8th, 9th century, Tibet was a major empire. It extended its territory all the way to Central Asia, to South Asia, and towards China as well. But then move forward to the 20th century. After the invasion of Tibet by the Chinese Communist Party, 98% of monasteries and nunneries were destroyed. 99% of monks and nuns were disrobed. More than 1 million Tibetans died under the occupation of People's Republic of China. So Tibetans continue to suffer even today. Then His Holiness Dalai Lama and 80,000 Tibetans came to India, and here in this great land of India, we rebuilt all the major monasteries and nunneries. And then we revive again the Buddhist civilization, Buddhist culture and Buddhist values in the Himalayan belt. Again, after the occupation of Tibet, when we suffered a lot, again it's India which provided us the land, which provided us the refuge, and which provided us the support. And that's how we were able to revive Buddhism or Nalanda tradition back in India. In Dharamsala, the Tibetan administration, we practice democracy. Again, we learn it from India. And we also follow Mahatma Gandhi's principle of ahimsa. So our movement is based on ahimsa. Again, it is Indian influence. So combinedly, as you said, India and Tibet, two countries, one ideology, geographically, spiritually, from democratic point of view, even the revival of our spirituality or the Nalanda tradition is all due to India. So that way, this morning, Prime Minister Modi ji talked about, Make in India. The original Make in India is the Tibetan movement, is the Tibetan spirituality, which came from India, is the Tibetan civilization, which is attached to India. Even territory-wise, during the unfortunate incident where Chinese army invaded, and there was border incursion, and 20 Indian Jawans were killed and more than 100 injured. Again, territorially, for thousands of years, it was always a border between India and Tibet. Not an inch of a land border existed between India and China. After the occupation of Tibet by the Chinese army entered Tibet. Now they are at the border of India, and they are causing conflicts, tensions, land grabs. So it was a plan of the Chinese leaders, Mao Zedong and Chinese leaders, as early as 1950s when they occupied Tibet. They said, Tibet is the palm. Once we occupied it, we must go after 5 fingers: Ladakh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and Arunachal Pradesh. So what happened at Galwan Valley in Ladakh was planned in 1950s after the occupation of Tibet. So the point I want to make is, if you want to have a peaceful region, Tibet is the key. When Tibet was independent and free, Tibet acted as the buffer zone, as the zone of peace between India and China. And when Tibet was free, there were hardly 75 or 100 border soldiers. Now you have around 200,000, 2 lakhs from the Chinese side and more than 2 lakhs from the Indian government side, right? And hence, the Indian government is spending billions of dollars defending the border. When Tibet was free, the border was demilitarized. It was peaceful for hundreds and hundreds of years. So yes, India and Tibet, it was 2 countries, 1 ideology, but with the invasion and occupation of Tibet by People's Republic of China and the repression of the Tibetan people, killings of the Tibetan people, has led to this tension in the area. Now, with the border incursions and its influence in Pakistan and all the neighboring countries have put more pressure on India. So solution to peaceful Asia lies with finding a peaceful solution to the issue of Tibet. So time and again, India has come to help us. So that's why His Holiness Dalai Lama says, India is our guru and we are India's student or shiksha. Having said that, we are a reliable and a good shiksha because Buddha's teaching is preserved in Tibetan language, and we have 300 plus volumes of what Buddha and his disciples said in Tibetan language, and we are reviving it in India, in the Himalayan region, and all over the world. So it is His Holiness the Dalai Lama's 4th commitment. He is determined to revive Nalanda tradition in India. So this is our contribution to this great land and to the kind and generous people of India. So together we will march forward to revive Nalanda tradition in India. So when we are suffering and Tibet is going through a tragic phase, it is the people and the land of India which has helped us. So let's continue this journey or the path of non-violence and ahimsa and path of democracy, and surely we will succeed. And when we succeed, you can say that Make in India succeeded, ahimsa succeeded, and justice prevailed. So with that, I want to thank the organizers for inviting me today and share few thoughts on this issue. Thank you.
Dr. Sangay, thank you for those wonderful words. The idea of India is something that you captured beautifully. You spoke about ahimsa. You spoke about the fact that through non-violence, we can have a new Make in India endeavor. A new Make in India endeavor in order to make sure that that the people in your country are living as democratically and peacefully as we are today in ours. But I must say that our endeavor is in order to unite nations by spreading the idea of India. So you've just beautifully summed up what we in the organization try to do with young boys and girls across the world. It's rightly said that friendship is the only cement that can unite the world. And this friendship of India and Tibet is something that I am sure will continue. But Dr. Sangay, at this juncture, with your permission, from the thousands who are watching, we've selected about 250 students who can ask you a question. But I know if 250 students ask you a question, it will not just take the better part of the next month, but probably it would take the better part of the next 2 months. So which is why I have gone about selecting 3 questions, which I will ask you on their behalf. And what I wanted to essentially also mention to all the people who are watching live, and everybody who's seen Dr. Sangay already knows about him, but the one thing that I wanted to mention, that apart from being, a columnist and a guest writer for some of the biggest publications in the world and regularly featuring as one of the most powerful leaders in the world in magazines such as The Time, etc., Dr. Sangay has also won numerous awards, whether it be the Leadership Award by the Regional New England Amnesty International, the Peace and Justice Award by the Peace Commission of the City of Cambridge, or whether it be, serving on distinguished advisory boards of the Asian American Civic Association, so on and so forth. Dr. Sangay, I must excuse myself from reading the entire introduction because you have an introduction that goes into some 30 to 40 pages. Mine, on the other hand, starts and finishes with the name Rishabh Shah, which nobody knows. So I will move forward and ask you the first pertinent question, which is, Dr. Sangay, and this comes from a young girl in the United States of America, and the question is, she says, China is not ceding territory. She's an Indian American who lives in America, and she says, Gayatri says, China is not ceding any territory. In fact, it is making new claims every year. As a global community, we wish and pray for Tibet's rightful government to be instilled. And this is coming from the United States of America. However, what is the roadmap that your establishment has to achieve this? Because as much as we wish and we pray for Tibet's rightful government to be instilled, what is the roadmap that you have laid out in order to reach your independence?
Yes, I think, as I said, the Chinese government plan was laid out in 1950s. They wanted to occupy Tibet, and they want to come after all 5 fingers. So the expansionist design or the strategy is been, executed even now. So yes, what we should do is, we must have coalition and coordination with other like-minded countries. All the countries that practices democracy and respects human rights and liberal values must come together and pressure on Chinese government and say that, you must play by the rule laid down by international norms and regulations. We have international laws. There are, international organizations. So these are the norms. We all play by it. And you must play by the same rule. You can't go on violating human rights of the Tibetan people, the Uyghurs people, and people in Hong Kong and Taiwan and Inner Mongolia. So we must press the Chinese government and say that we want you to be a responsible member of the international community and follow international norms and laws and give human rights to the Tibetan people. So I travel from capital to capital, from Brussels to Tokyo to Canberra to Washington DC. I always say the same thing. We must make Chinese government accountable. They can't go on violating human rights of the Tibetan people, act with impunity. So hence, raising the issue of Tibet at Human Rights Council, writing reports about it, at the United Nations are very, very important. So this is the way to move forward. So yes, coalition and coordination with like-minded countries, democratic countries.
Democratic countries, like-minded coordination and cooperation with countries who believe in the spirit of democracy. But Dr. Sangay, do you really think that the Chinese, they're finger after finger, sometimes we get worried they'll take the entire hand. We extended a hand of friendship, but now they're just interested in taking the fingers on the hand for different nefarious purposes. Do you think that a country such as China can be trusted when it comes to giving or ceding territory peacefully? Do you think that is something that, do you believe that utopian concept will actually come and fructify into reality?
I know from our experience, our experience was of betrayal, right? So they promise us prosperity, they promise us, a lot of development and progress for the Tibetan people. For example, they said, we will build one road connecting China to Tibet, and this will bring progress, and Tibetans believed, right? So in fact, we helped them build the road, and Chinese paid our parents and grandparents with gold coins. So we sang a song saying Chinese Communist Party is like a generous parents who shower you with gold coin to build your own road. Once the road was completed, trucks came, tanks came, guns came and occupied our country. So they also use the strategy called elite co-optation. They are using it in Africa, they are using it in Europe, and they are using it in America. Essentially, they try to co-opt politicians, business leaders, religious leaders, journalists, intellectuals, right? Their co-optation is taking place all over the world. And the blueprint started in Tibet. So mix up these two, promising us one thing, and then, they said Tibetans will have autonomy, the Dalai Lama's power and authority will remain the same. We are not going to make any of the changes without seeking the consent of the Tibetan people. All those promises were made, but each one of them were violated. So hence, when you deal with Chinese government, we always say, you must verify, 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 then only trust. For example, the recent tragic incident at Galwan Valley, in October last year, Xi Jinping, Chinese president, and Prime Minister Modi ji were meeting in Tamil Nadu, and then this year they were supposed to celebrate 70th anniversary of diplomatic relationship between India and China, right? And they were supposed to have 70 major events to celebrate it, right? Because India was one of the very few countries which recognized China in 1950s. Now, instead of thanking India for that diplomatic relationship, instead of observing 70 major events in India and China, essentially the Chinese army killed 100 Indian soldiers and injured more. So this is a sign that what they say is not necessarily what they deliver.
Oh, that's very true, and we've seen that from the 60s all the way now to 2020. But you rightly mentioned, just last year they were in Tamil Nadu and they had the celebration of diplomacy. But Dr. Sangay, the second question, and actually, ironically, it links to what we're speaking about. There's a young girl from Kerala who's asking this question, and she says, today we live in an age of extreme right-wing governments, Dr. Sangay. His Holiness has always talked about moderation. In fact, Buddhism advocates that, to be moderate. Do you think multilateralism will survive, given the fact there is always a country-first approach? Because a country-first approach is what many world governments are taking. And despite the corridors of diplomacy being kept open, are they actually able to come up with any solution? Because go to think about it, like you rightly said, in Tamil Nadu last year what we saw and today what we're seeing, do you think that multilateralism will survive in this day and age of me, myself and I?
Definitely, I think, this pandemic has, reset the button. The pandemic has such a major impact, it's equivalent to, Treaty of Westphalia, where after 30 years of war and 10 million people dying in Europe, peace prevailed. Then you moved to First World War and Second World War. Again, then there was peace prevailed after the Second World War, but then the Cold War started, and then we go to 1990s. And after the Cold War, Soviet Union collapsed and Berlin Wall came down, internationalism and multilateralism and all these international organizations came into existence with full force. But then the internationalism had its own phase, and in recent years the strongman and nationalism has revived from America to Asia, even in Europe and Israel. But then there's now, I think after the pandemic, I think the health will be more important, environment and climate change will be more important, and then the multilateralism will also be back. When if you can clearly see a trend. I don't want to comment politically. Even in Israel, the the moderates are coming back, and even in Europe, and so this moderate wing will come back, and the liberalism and multilateralism will also prevail, because this global pandemic has forced leaders and countries to rethink unilateralism. It's not possible. You can solve this pandemic only with coordination and coalition of every country in the whole world. All the scientists should come together and find vaccination. So hence, yes, coalition and coordination and multilateralism will be back. So we have no option. So hence what His Holiness Dalai Lama said all along, that we have only one earth. This is our only home. We must live together, survive together peacefully, as a family. And that's the only option. So this pandemic has forced us to think that we are one humanity and one world.
It is indeed one humanity and one world. And what you just said, again, very articulately put, you've quite honestly are saying the same things that we hope that world leaders across will actually go about doing. But the only concern that we have, Dr. Sangay, is that it's great on TV, and we both are on national television today and we're saying all of this. But it's another thing when it comes to actually solving the issues of the pandemic. I know the pandemic has brought the world together like none before. And it's a good thing, it's a great sign in that sense that we've come together. But how much of this bilateral, trilateral, multilateral cooperation will remain? I only hope that it actually remains and continues, and that we can continue to unite nations by, like you rightly said, by spreading the idea of peace and non-violence. As I end this, I'd like to ask you the final question. This is a young boy from Mumbai. His name is Swapnil, and he asks this question. He says, and very naively he puts it, and this probably just sums up the entire organization. We, just like you, very much believe that the world can be united, and the world can be united on the basis of peace and non-violence. He asks, saying, can young people and youth organizations do anything to build a borderless world which is not totalitarian and which does not have the existing fissy-paris tendencies that we see today? Can young people and young organizations do anything about it?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned, in Europe, right, before Treaty of Westphalia was signed, Protestants and Catholics were fighting among each other, the Roman Empire, all that. And then ultimately, violence had to give way to peace. And also, Second World War, all the European countries were killing each other, French and the Germans and Italians. And after the Second World War, the European Union came into form, right? So the fact that millions of people kill each other and died, but they gave way to peace and to live together as one, as the European Union, is an example that yes, it's possible. So youth has important role to play. Any event, any organization that you are part of, you must give your time and resources and get your exposure and get your training as an activist and get your training as a leader. And step by step by step, it will help you a lot. For example, I myself was a student and youth leader. As the president now of an administration, all the skills, the tactics that I learned during the youth leadership helps me a lot, even to administer, our government.
Right, Dr. Sangay, thank you for that. And what you said is so brilliant, because we can end on that note. You said you were a student leader and today a president. This is the example that we want young people to follow. An erudite statesman today, and yesterday he was a student. For all the tomorrow's leaders who are watching today, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it was a pleasure hosting Dr. Lobsang Sangay today at I.I.M.U.N. as our chief guest. Dr. Sangay, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good luck to all the students.
Thank you so much. Thank you.